The morning of September 15th, 2010 began like any other for 12-year-old Marcus Thompson. The autumn air in West Virginia's Monongahela National Forest carried the crisp scent of falling leaves as he adjusted his backpack straps and followed his scout troop towards Seneca Caverns. Marcus had always been drawn to adventure, but caves made him nervous. Still, he wasn't about to admit that to the other boys who seemed so eager to explore the underground passages. Scout leader Jim Davidson gathered the 8 boys at the cavern entrance, his weathered face serious as he went through the safety protocols one final time. "Stay with your buddy, keep your headlamps on, and nobody wanders off alone," he emphasized, his voice echoing slightly against the limestone walls. Marcus was paired with Tommy Chen, a quiet kid from his school who shared his reluctance about confined spaces. The group began their descent into the cool darkness, their voices gradually fading as they moved deeper into the earth. If you're enjoying this mysterious story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. Your support helps us bring you more incredible true stories like this one. The cavern system stretched for miles beneath the Appalachian Mountains, with passages that had been carved by underground rivers over millions of years. The main tourist route was well marked and safe, but numerous unmarked tunnels branched off into the darkness. About 30 minutes into their exploration, the group stopped at a large chamber called the Cathedral Room, where spectacular formations of stalactites and stalagmites created natural pillars reaching from floor to ceiling. It was here that Marcus made a decision that would change everything. While Davidson was explaining the geological processes that formed the cave, Marcus noticed a narrow opening behind one of the larger formations. Something about it called to him. Perhaps it was the gentle breeze that seemed to flow from within, suggesting it led somewhere significant. When Tommy wasn't looking and the group's attention was focused on Davidson's lecture, Marcus slipped away from the designated path. The passage was tighter than he'd expected, requiring him to crawl on his hands and knees. His headlamp illuminated rough limestone walls that seemed to press closer with each foot he advanced. The rational part of his mind screamed at him to turn back, but curiosity drove him forward. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 minutes, the tunnel opened into another chamber, smaller than the cathedral room, but with several passages leading in different directions. Marcus tried to retrace his steps, but in his excitement to explore, he hadn't paid attention to the way he'd come. Every tunnel looked the same in the harsh LED light of his headlamp. Panic began to set in as he realized he was lost. He called out for help, his voice swallowed by the stone corridors. Meanwhile, back at the cathedral room, Tommy had noticed his buddy was missing and alerted Davidson. The scout leader's face went pale as he realized one of his charges had vanished. The search began immediately. Davidson radioed for emergency assistance while keeping the other boys together. Within 2 hours, teams from the West Virginia Cave Rescue had arrived, along with local law enforcement and Marcus's frantic parents, Robert and Linda Thompson. Linda, a nurse at the local hospital, could barely contain her terror as she watched rescue teams disappear into the earth where her son had vanished. Robert, a coal miner who understood the dangers of underground spaces better than most, stood with his arm around his wife, his jaw clenched with worry and anger at himself for letting Marcus go on the trip. The initial search focused on the known passages near where Marcus had disappeared. Cave rescue specialists, equipped with advanced lighting systems and communication equipment, methodically explored every tunnel and chamber within a half-mile radius of the cathedral room. They found his baseball cap caught on a rock formation about 200 yards from where he'd separated from the group, but no other trace of the boy. The discovery only deepened the mystery and heightened the urgency of the search. As night fell on that first day, the rescue operation expanded. Teams from neighboring states arrived to assist, bringing specialized equipment including ground-penetrating radar and sensitive listening devices. The cavern system was far more extensive than initially believed, with unmapped passages that connected to other cave systems throughout the region. Some of these passages were so narrow that even experienced cavers had never fully explored them. The possibility that Marcus had somehow accessed these unmapped areas made the search exponentially more complex. The second day brought media attention that Linda Thompson would later describe as both a blessing and a curse. News vans lined the Forest Service road leading to the cavern entrance, their satellite dishes reaching toward the grey October sky. Reporters interviewed anyone connected to the case, from Davidson, who blamed himself for the tragedy, to local cavers who offered theories about where a lost child might have gone. The story captured national attention. "Boy lost in West Virginia cave system," headlines read, accompanied by Marcus's school photo, a gap-toothed smile that now seemed heartbreakingly innocent. Community volunteers arrived in droves. Local churches organized prayer vigils, while experienced hikers and amateur spelunkers offered to join the search efforts. The Monongahela National Forest Service coordinated with multiple agencies to prevent the well-meaning volunteers from interfering with professional rescue operations, but their presence provided emotional support for the Thompson family. Linda's sister, Carol, drove down from Pittsburgh to stay with them, helping to field the constant phone calls from reporters and managing the stream of neighbors bringing food and offering help. By the third day, the harsh reality of the situation began to set in. Cave rescue experts explained to the family that while people had survived longer periods underground, a 12-year-old boy without proper equipment, food, or adequate clothing would face increasingly dire circumstances with each passing hour. The temperature in the deeper parts of the cave system remained constant at about 54 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, cold enough to cause hypothermia in someone wearing only a light jacket and jeans. The search teams had covered over 3 miles of known passages and had begun using specialized cameras to explore areas too narrow for human access. They found evidence that someone had passed through certain areas, scuff marks on cave walls, disturbed formations, even what appeared to be a partial footprint in a patch of cave mud. These discoveries kept hope alive, but also raised new questions about how far into the system Marcus might have traveled. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a geologist from West Virginia University who had studied the region's cave systems for over 20 years, joined the effort on the 4th day. She brought detailed maps of the cavern network that revealed connections between Seneca caverns and cave systems as far as 30 miles away. Some of these connections had never been fully mapped, existing only as theoretical passages based on groundwater flow patterns and geological surveys. The implications were staggering. If Marcus had somehow found his way into these connections, he could be anywhere within a vast underground network spanning multiple counties. The psychological toll on the Thompson family was becoming evident. Robert had taken leave from his job at the mine and spent every waking hour at the cavern entrance, refusing to leave even when rescue coordinators assured him there was nothing he could do. Linda oscillated between hope and despair, clutching Marcus's favorite stuffed animal, a worn teddy bear named Buster that had been his comfort object since he was 3. She had barely slept or eaten since her son's disappearance, surviving on coffee and the prayers of their small Methodist church congregation. As the first week ended, the official rescue operation began to transition into a recovery mission. The statistical likelihood of finding Marcus alive had dropped to nearly 0, though officials were careful not to communicate this directly to his parents. The media presence began to diminish as other news stories took precedence, leaving the family feeling increasingly isolated in their vigil. However, a core group of professional cavers and volunteers refused to give up, continuing to explore the more remote areas of the cave system. The breakthrough came on day 9, though it would be years before anyone understood its significance. A team exploring a passage nearly 4 miles from the original search area found what appeared to be a small shelter constructed from loose rocks and cave debris. Inside this crude shelter, they discovered Marcus's backpack, his broken flashlight, and most importantly, a series of marks carved into the cave wall with a sharp stone. The marks appeared to be tally marks, dozens of them, arranged in groups of 5 in the traditional counting method. Beside the tallies, carved in shaky letters, was the word "help." The discovery energized the search effort and brought the media attention rushing back. The shelter suggested that Marcus had survived the initial days of his ordeal and had possessed enough presence of mind to create some form of protection from the cave's constant chill. The tally marks implied he had been keeping track of time, though their number, 47 total marks, seemed inconsistent with the 9 days he had been missing. Cave rescue experts theorized that the stress and darkness of his situation might have caused him to lose track of time, marking days multiple times or creating marks during periods of delirium. More significantly, the location of the shelter opened up new possibilities for the search. The passage where it was found connected to a network of caves that extended deep into the Appalachian ridge system. Some of these passages were known to emerge in neighboring states, though the connections were largely theoretical. Cave hydrologists had long suspected that underground water systems linked caves across hundreds of miles. But proving these connections had been impossible without extensive exploration that was both dangerous and expensive. The shelter became a base of operations for the extended search. Teams worked outward from the location in all directions, mapping previously unexplored passages and documenting every sign of human passage. They found more evidence of Marcus's presence: threads from his clothing caught on rock formations, disturbed areas where someone might have rested, and in one location what appeared to be a small pile of cave insects, suggesting he had tried to find food in the desperate situation. Robert Thompson, drawing on his experience in the coal mines, insisted on joining the search teams despite the obvious emotional toll. His knowledge of underground geology proved valuable in predicting which passages were most likely to remain stable and which might lead to surface connections. Linda remained at the makeshift command post that had been established at the cavern entrance, coordinating with the growing number of volunteers and maintaining communication with the various search teams. As the search entered its 3rd week, the Thompson family faced increasing pressure from well-meaning friends and relatives to accept reality and begin planning a memorial service. The local Methodist pastor, Reverend David Mills, gently suggested that sometimes God's plan was beyond human understanding, but Linda refused to consider the possibility that her son was dead. She had become convinced, based on nothing more than a mother's intuition, that Marcus was still alive somewhere in the vast underground network. The search continued sporadically for months, then years. Professional rescue operations eventually concluded, but dedicated volunteers continued exploring the remote reaches of the cave system. The Thompson family's savings were depleted by the costs of the extended search, leading to financial stress that strained their marriage. Robert returned to work at the mine, but his concentration was affected, leading to safety concerns that eventually resulted in his being reassigned to surface operations. Linda struggled with depression and survivor's guilt, eventually requiring professional counseling to function in daily life. The 5th anniversary of Marcus's disappearance brought renewed media attention and a fresh influx of volunteers, including some cavers from other states who had followed the story. A team from Kentucky, familiar with the extensive cave systems in their own state, brought new theories about possible connections between the West Virginia caves and networks that extended as far south as Tennessee and as far north as Pennsylvania. Their expertise in long-distance cave navigation opened up search possibilities that had never been considered. During this renewed search effort, teams began using advanced GPS technology to map the precise locations of all discovered evidence. This technological approach revealed a pattern that had been missed in earlier searches. The evidence of Marcus's presence formed a rough line pointing northeast, suggesting he had been moving in a specific direction rather than wandering randomly. This discovery led to the exploration of passages that extended toward the Maryland and Pennsylvania borders, areas that had been considered too remote to be relevant to the search. The years that followed were marked by periodic discoveries that kept hope alive while deepening the mystery. In 2013, cavers in Pennsylvania found a child's sneaker in a cave system nearly 60 miles from Seneca Caverns. The shoe was identified as the same brand and size that Marcus had been wearing, though it was impossible to confirm definitively that it was his. In 2015, a team in Maryland discovered what appeared to be more tally marks carved into cave walls, though these were weathered and could have been much older than Marcus's disappearance. These discoveries, while tantalizing, also highlighted the vast scope of the underground network and the seemingly impossible task of locating one person within it. Cave experts estimated that the connected cave systems in the Appalachian region contained thousands of miles of passages, many of which had never been explored by humans. The idea that a 12-year-old boy could navigate even a fraction of this network seemed beyond credibility. Yet the evidence suggested that Marcus had somehow done exactly that. Linda Thompson became an advocate for improved cave safety and search procedures, working with national cave rescue organizations to develop better protocols for missing person cases in cave environments. Her efforts led to improved mapping of cave systems and better coordination between rescue organizations across state lines. Robert channeled his grief into physical activity, becoming an accomplished caver himself and participating in training exercises for new cave rescue volunteers. As the 10-year anniversary approached in 2020, the Thompson family had settled into a painful new normal. Marcus would have been 22 years old, a young man starting his adult life. Linda had created a room in their home that served as both a shrine to their missing son and a command center for ongoing search efforts. The walls were covered with maps of cave systems, photographs from search operations, and letters from supporters around the world who had been touched by their story. The COVID-19 pandemic temporarily halted most cave search activities, but it also led to advances in remote sensing technology that would prove crucial to the case. During the lockdown period, geologists and cave specialists used ground-penetrating radar and seismic analysis to create more detailed maps of underground networks. These maps revealed previously unknown connections between cave systems and identified areas where surface access might be possible in locations that had never been explored. In early 2021, a team of researchers from Virginia Tech began using these advanced mapping techniques specifically in relation to Marcus's case. Their analysis suggested several possible routes he could have taken through the underground network, including one that extended northeast into Pennsylvania before curving back toward the west. This route, if it existed as a navigable passage, could theoretically allow someone to travel underground for hundreds of miles, eventually emerging in locations as distant as Ohio or even Indiana. The Virginia Tech research caught the attention of Dr. James Patterson, a geologist specializing in karst topography, who had been following the case since its beginning. Patterson had long theorized that the Appalachian cave systems were more extensively connected than most experts believed, and Marcus's disappearance provided a tragic but compelling case study for his theories. He organized a consortium of universities to conduct a comprehensive study of cave connections throughout the eastern United States, using Marcus's case as the focal point for their research. This academic interest brought new resources and technology to the search, including specialized robots that could explore passages too dangerous for human cavers. The robots were equipped with cameras, air quality sensors, and communication equipment that allowed them to transmit data from deep within the cave systems. Over the course of 2021 and 2022, these robotic explorations discovered dozens of previously unknown passages and confirmed several connections between cave systems that had been purely theoretical. One of the most significant discoveries came in October 2022, exactly 12 years after Marcus's disappearance. A robotic probe exploring a passage in southern Pennsylvania discovered what appeared to be a makeshift camp in a large chamber nearly 200 feet underground. The site contained the remnants of a fire, suggesting someone had learned to create light and warmth in the cave environment. More intriguingly, the walls around the camp were covered with tally marks, thousands of them, organized in groups and arranged in patterns that suggested a systematic effort to track time over a period of years. The discovery of this underground camp sent shockwaves through the cave rescue community and brought international attention back to Marcus's case. The location was nearly 150 miles from where he had originally disappeared, accessible only through a complex network of passages that would have required expert-level navigation skills to traverse. The evidence suggested that someone had lived in this location for an extended period, possibly years, surviving on cave water, insects, and whatever resources they could find or create. Dr. Patterson's team immediately began planning an expedition to reach the site, though the journey would be extremely dangerous and require the most experienced cavers available. The passage route involved underwater sections, areas where cavers would need to squeeze through openings barely large enough for a human body, and chambers where the air quality was questionable. The expedition would need to be carefully planned and could take several days to complete, with teams establishing supply caches and communication relays along the route. As preparations for the expedition began, Linda Thompson experienced a mix of hope and terror that she hadn't felt since the early days of her son's disappearance. The possibility that Marcus had somehow survived in the underground world for over a decade seemed simultaneously miraculous and horrifying. How could a child adapt to such conditions? What would years of isolation and darkness do to a person's mind and body? And if he had survived for so long, why hadn't he found a way to escape or signal for help? The expedition launched in March 2023 with a team of 6 expert cavers led by Dr. Patterson himself. The journey to the underground camp took nearly 18 hours, with the team navigating through multiple challenging sections that tested their skills and endurance. When they finally reached the chamber where the camp had been discovered, they found evidence of human habitation that was both heartening and deeply disturbing. The camp was more sophisticated than the robotic images had suggested. Someone had constructed windbreaks using carefully stacked rocks, created storage areas for water collection, and even developed what appeared to be a primitive system for cultivating cave fungi as a food source. The tally marks on the walls were organized in a complex pattern that suggested the inhabitant had not only been tracking days, but also seasons, lunar cycles, and other temporal patterns. Most remarkably, they found carved messages, not just pleas for help, but philosophical reflections, mathematical calculations, and what appeared to be attempts at artistic expression. Among these messages, the expedition team found something that made their hearts race. Marcus Thompson, age 25, day 4745, still hope. The message was carved in careful, deliberate letters, and the math was correct. 4,745 days was approximately 13 years. The discovery confirmed what seemed impossible. Marcus had not only survived his underground ordeal, but had somehow thrived, developing the skills necessary to live in one of the most hostile environments on Earth. The team also found evidence that the camp was no longer occupied. The fire pit was cold and showed no signs of recent use. The water collection system was dry, and some of the constructed windbreaks had partially collapsed. Most concerning, they found what appeared to be a trail leading away from the camp toward unexplored passages that headed further north and west. The tally marks on the walls ended abruptly at day 4,745, with no explanation for why the count had stopped or where the inhabitant had gone. The discovery of the abandoned camp raised as many questions as it answered. If Marcus had survived for 13 years underground, developing remarkable survival skills and maintaining his sanity well enough to keep detailed records of his time, why had he abandoned this relatively secure location? Where had he gone? And was he still alive somewhere in the vast underground network? The expedition team spent 3 days at the campsite, documenting everything they found and collecting samples that might provide clues about the inhabitants' health and lifestyle. When news of the expedition's discoveries reached the surface, it created an international sensation. Marcus Thompson's story, which had begun as a tragic tale of a lost child, had evolved into something unprecedented in human survival records. Scientists, psychologists, and survival experts struggled to understand how anyone, let alone someone who had been a child when his ordeal began, could adapt to such extreme conditions and maintain their humanity in complete isolation. Linda and Robert Thompson were brought to the site as soon as a safer route could be established. Seeing the evidence of their son's survival, the careful organization of his living space, the detailed record-keeping, the signs of intelligence and hope that permeated everything he had created, was overwhelming. Linda wept as she traced the carved letters of his name on the cave wall, finally having proof that her maternal instincts had been correct all along. Robert studied the water collection system and the methods Marcus had used to create fire, marveling at the ingenuity his son had developed during his years underground. The abandoned camp became the focus of an intensified search effort, with teams exploring every passage that led away from the site. The trail Marcus had left behind was subtle but detectable to experienced trackers: disturbed formations, areas where someone had rested, and occasionally more carved messages. These messages revealed that Marcus had continued to move through the cave system, apparently following underground water sources that he had learned to trust as navigation aids. One of the most intriguing discoveries was a series of messages that suggested Marcus had developed a sophisticated understanding of cave geology and hydrology. His carved notes included observations about seasonal water level changes, air current patterns, and even primitive maps of the passages he had explored. This knowledge would have been crucial to his survival, but it also suggested that his years underground had transformed him from a lost child into something resembling a professional speleologist. The search teams following Marcus's trail faced unprecedented challenges. The passages he had chosen to explore were often at the limits of human capability, requiring advanced technical climbing skills and specialized equipment. Some sections were so narrow that the searchers had to be winched through on cables, while others required underwater navigation through flooded tunnels. The fact that Marcus had traversed these obstacles without proper equipment seemed to defy explanation, suggesting he had developed physical capabilities far beyond those of an ordinary person. As the search continued throughout 2023, teams began to discover more camps, each showing evidence of Marcus's evolving survival skills and psychological adaptation to his underground world. The camps were spaced roughly 50 to 100 miles apart, connected by some of the most challenging cave passages in North America. At each site, they found evidence of his continued intellectual development, increasingly sophisticated water collection systems, more efficient methods of food cultivation, and carved writings that showed growing philosophical depth and mathematical understanding. The psychological implications of Marcus's apparent adaptation fascinated researchers around the world. Dr. Sarah Chen, a psychologist specializing in extreme isolation, theorized that Marcus's young age, when he became lost, might have been crucial to his survival. Children's brains are more plastic and adaptable than adult brains, she argued, and Marcus might have been able to develop cognitive and physical capabilities that would have been impossible for an adult to acquire. His apparent ability to navigate complex three-dimensional spaces in complete darkness suggested he had developed enhanced spatial reasoning and possibly even echolocation abilities similar to those of blind individuals. The story captured the imagination of people worldwide, inspiring countless theories about human adaptability and survival instincts. Some scientists saw Marcus as a real-life example of human evolution in action, demonstrating how extreme environmental pressures could drive the development of new capabilities within a single lifetime. Others focused on the psychological aspects, wondering how someone could maintain their sanity and humanity during such prolonged isolation, and what his eventual reintegration into surface society might involve. Religious communities also found meaning in Marcus's story, with some viewing his survival as evidence of divine protection and others seeing it as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The Methodist Church, where the Thompson family worshipped, organized prayer groups that had been meeting continuously since 2010, and they saw the discoveries in the caves as validation of their faith that Marcus was still alive somewhere in the darkness. As 2024 began, the search for Marcus had evolved into something resembling an archaeological expedition, with teams carefully documenting each discovery and analyzing the patterns in his movement through the underground network. Computer models were developed to predict where he might have gone next, based on his apparent preferences for certain types of passages and his reliance on underground water sources. These models suggested several possible routes he could have taken, including some that led toward cave systems in Ohio, Indiana, and even Illinois. The search had also become a race against time in a different sense. If Marcus was still alive, he would now be 25 years old, and the physical demands of his underground lifestyle would only increase with age. The cave environment that had somehow sustained him as a growing teenager might become unsurvivable as he aged, particularly if he suffered any kind of injury or illness without access to medical care. The search teams felt an increasing urgency to locate him before time and the harsh underground environment claimed their final victory. In May 2024, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A cave rescue team in southern Ohio was conducting a routine training exercise when they discovered fresh evidence of human presence in a cave system near the town of Hillsborough. The evidence was subtle, but unmistakable to experienced cavers. Recently disturbed formations, a small cache of food, cave insects and fungi, and most significantly, a carved message that read, "MT Day 5127, moving north, water sweet here." The mathematical precision continued to be remarkable. Day 5127 corresponded to approximately 14 years since Marcus's disappearance, suggesting he had maintained his careful record-keeping throughout his underground odyssey. The message's reference to moving north and water sweet here indicated he was following underground water sources and evaluating their quality, skills that would be essential for long-term survival in the cave environment. The Ohio discovery triggered the largest cave search operation in American history. Teams from multiple states converged on the region, bringing advanced equipment and coordinating through a central command post that rivaled military operations in its sophistication. The search was complicated by the fact that the cave systems in southern Ohio were less well mapped than those in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, requiring teams to simultaneously search for Marcus while documenting previously unexplored passages. Linda Thompson, now 52 years old and showing the physical toll of 14 years of stress and hope, established a temporary residence near the Ohio command post. She had become an expert in cave rescue operations herself, understanding the technical challenges and statistical probabilities better than many professional searchers. Her presence served as both inspiration and reminder of what the search meant in human terms. This wasn't just an academic exercise or survival curiosity, but a desperate attempt to reunite a family that had been torn apart by tragedy. The Ohio search revealed that Marcus had continued to evolve his survival strategies. The caches they discovered were more sophisticated than earlier finds, including what appeared to be primitive tools made from cave formations and organic materials. He had also begun leaving more detailed messages, including warnings about dangerous passages and recommendations for safe routes through the cave system. These messages suggested that Marcus had not only survived, but had begun thinking about others who might follow his path, a level of psychological development that amazed the experts studying his case. As summer turned to fall in 2024, the search teams made a discovery that would change everything. In a large chamber nearly 300 feet underground, they found evidence of Marcus's most recent camp, and this one showed signs of very recent occupation. The fire pit was still warm, water collection containers held fresh water, and most significantly, they found a message carved just days earlier. MT Day 5234. Heard voices above, hope returning, preparing to surface. The message indicated that Marcus had heard the search teams and was planning to attempt reaching the surface, something he apparently hadn't tried in 14 years underground. The psychological implications were staggering. Why had he chosen to remain hidden for so long when he clearly possessed the skills to navigate toward the surface? What had changed in his thinking that made him suddenly willing to end his underground exile? Search teams immediately began intensive exploration of all passages leading from the chamber, racing to locate Marcus before he moved again or attempted a dangerous ascent through unknown routes. The chamber was in a complex part of the cave system with multiple levels and connections, making it possible for him to emerge at various points across a 20-mile radius. Surface teams were positioned at every known cave entrance in the region, while underground teams continued their methodical exploration of the passages. The psychological pressure on everyone involved was intense. After 14 years of uncertainty, the possibility of actually reuniting Marcus with his family was almost too overwhelming to contemplate. What would he be like after so many years in isolation? How would he react to seeing other people? Would he be able to readjust to surface life, or had his adaptation to the underground environment made him unable to function in normal society? Dr. Patterson coordinated with psychologists and social workers to develop protocols for Marcus's potential discovery and extraction. The experts agreed that the reunion would need to be handled with extreme care. Marcus would likely be suffering from severe vitamin D deficiency and other health issues related to his underground lifestyle. His eyes might be highly sensitive to light, and his social skills would be those of a 12-year-old boy, despite his physical age of 25. The integration process could take months or even years. On November 3, 2024, exactly 14 years and 49 days after Marcus Thompson disappeared into Seneca Caverns, A surface monitoring team near Hillsboro, Ohio, received a radio call that would end one of the longest missing person cases in American history. A local farmer named Joe Martinez had been checking on his cattle when he saw something that made him question his own eyes. A thin, pale figure emerging from a sinkhole on his property, moving slowly and deliberately toward his farmhouse. Martinez later described the figure as unlike anything he had ever seen. The man appeared to be in his 20s, but moved with the careful precision of someone much older. His clothing was makeshift, fashioned from materials that Martinez couldn't identify, and his hair had grown long and wild. Most startling were his eyes. They seemed to see everything simultaneously, moving constantly as if tracking multiple threats or opportunities at once. When Martinez called out to him, the man froze instantly, then began to slowly raise his hands in a gesture that seemed part surrender, part greeting. "Are you Marcus Thompson?" Martinez asked, remembering the news stories that had captivated the region for months. The man's response was barely a whisper, but it was clear. "Yes, I'm Marcus Thompson. I think I'm ready to go home now." The reunion that followed was unlike anything the rescue teams had prepared for. Marcus was physically healthy, but showed clear signs of his extraordinary adaptation to underground life. His muscle tone was unusual, developed in ways that reflected years of navigating cave passages and climbing rock formations. His hearing was remarkably acute, and he seemed uncomfortable with normal lighting levels, squinting and shading his eyes even in the dim autumn afternoon. Most remarkably, his mental state was far more stable than anyone had dared hope. While he was clearly overwhelmed by suddenly encountering multiple people after years of solitude, he was articulate, rational, and showed no signs of the psychological breakdown that experts had feared. His first questions were about his parents. Were they still alive? Were they still looking for him, and would they forgive him for staying away so long? Linda and Robert Thompson arrived at the Ohio Medical Facility, where Marcus was being evaluated within hours of his emergence. The reunion was emotional beyond description, but also awkward in ways that highlighted the complexity of their situation. The 12-year-old boy they had lost was now a 25-year-old man with experiences that no human in recorded history had ever survived. Marcus towered over his mother, but when she hugged him, he seemed to shrink back into the child he had been when he disappeared. The medical evaluation revealed the full extent of Marcus's remarkable adaptation. His bone density was higher than normal, apparently strengthened by years of climbing and navigating challenging terrain. His cardiovascular fitness was exceptional, though his body showed clear signs of nutritional deficiencies that would require careful treatment. Most intriguingly, his brain scans showed unusual development in areas associated with spatial reasoning and sensory processing, suggesting his years underground had literally reshaped his neural architecture. Marcus's initial interviews with psychologists and debriefing specialists revealed the extraordinary story of his survival and development. He described learning to navigate by sound and air currents, developing techniques for finding and purifying water, and creating tools from materials found in the cave environment. He had learned to cultivate certain types of cave fungi and had become expert at catching and preparing cave insects for food. Most remarkably, he had maintained his sanity through a combination of intellectual exercises, physical challenges, and what he described as conversations with the cave itself. The psychological implications of his story fascinated researchers, but they also raised troubling questions. Marcus revealed that he had found several opportunities to reach the surface over the years, but had chosen not to take them. He described feeling like he belonged in the underground world, that it had become his natural habitat. The decision to finally emerge had come only after he began to worry about his aging body's ability to continue surviving in the harsh cave environment. Perhaps most surprisingly, Marcus expressed ambivalence about returning to surface life. He was grateful to be reunited with his parents and curious about how the world had changed during his absence, but he also felt a deep connection to the underground realm that had been his home for 14 years. He spoke about the caves with the reverence of a naturalist describing a beloved wilderness, referring to specific passages and chambers by names he had given them, and describing the underground ecosystem with scientific precision. The integration process proved to be as complex as the experts had predicted. Marcus struggled with sensory overload in normal environments, finding the sounds, lights, and social interactions of surface life overwhelming after years of solitude. He had difficulty sleeping in enclosed spaces, preferring to camp outside under the open sky. His social skills, frozen at the level of a 12-year-old when he disappeared, required extensive rehabilitation to help him interact appropriately with others. However, Marcus also possessed capabilities that amazed everyone who worked with him. His spatial reasoning abilities were off the charts, allowing him to create detailed, three-dimensional maps from memory and navigate complex environments with uncanny precision. His physical capabilities were extraordinary, and he demonstrated climbing and movement skills that professional athletes found difficult to match. His knowledge of geology, hydrology, and cave ecology rivaled that of professional speleologists. Universities competed to study Marcus's case, offering him opportunities for education and research that would allow him to contribute to scientific understanding while continuing his own development. He eventually enrolled in a specially designed program that allowed him to study geology and cave science while gradually adjusting to surface life. His unique perspective and unparalleled experience made him an invaluable resource for understanding underground environments and survival psychology. The Thompson family's journey back to normalcy was gradual and sometimes painful. Linda and Robert had to learn to relate to their son as an adult rather than the child they remembered, while Marcus had to rediscover his place in a family and society that had continued evolving without him. Family counseling sessions helped them navigate these complex dynamics, but the process took years and required patience and understanding from everyone involved. Marcus's emergence also had broader implications for cave rescue operations and missing person protocols. His case demonstrated that survival was possible in environments previously considered unsurvivable, leading to changes in how long search operations were maintained and how cave systems were explored. His detailed knowledge of underground navigation and survival techniques was incorporated into training programs for cave rescue specialists. Today, Marcus Thompson works as a consultant for cave rescue operations and contributes to research on extreme environment survival. He has written extensively about his experiences, though he maintains that words cannot fully convey the profound psychological and spiritual journey of his 14 years underground. He still spends time in caves, but now as a researcher and guide rather than a lost child, helping others understand and respect the hidden world beneath our feet. His story continues to inspire people around the world, serving as a testament to human adaptability and the power of hope. The boy who disappeared into darkness and emerged as a man had accomplished something unprecedented in human survival records. But perhaps more importantly, he had maintained his humanity throughout an ordeal that could have broken anyone else. Marcus Thompson's journey from lost child to underground survivor to contributing member of society represents one of the most extraordinary chapters in the annals of human endurance and adaptation. The cave where it all began, Seneca Caverns, now includes a display about Marcus's case as part of their educational program. Visitors learn about cave safety, but they also hear the remarkable story of the boy who got lost and found something extraordinary in the darkness. not just survival, but a profound understanding of what it means to be human in the face of impossible circumstances. His legacy serves as both a cautionary tale about cave safety and an inspiring example of the incredible resilience of the human spirit.